Welcome back. Let's get started with lesson number 4, DoD funding programs. All right, so what are the programs that we will cover in this course? They are what I'm going to call single investigator or core programs, and MURI, Multidisciplinary University Research Initiative, DURIP, Defense University Research Instrumentation Program. I will talk a little bit about the HBCU MI programs, and one of the more common ones especially. Talk about DEPSCoR, which is the Defense Established Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. And I will talk about conferences. All right, so, one more category here, the Young Investigator Programs. I bet a lot of people are interested to hear about this one, so we will cover those as well. Now, even though we're going to talk about each one of these programs, and I'm using the term programs kind of generally here, but these are kind of like the types of grants or awards that you can get broadly. It's important to cover this and provide the information and clarify what each of these are, but I want to caution you about something. It is very easy for PIs to kind of fixate on a certain program. Oh, okay, this program would be a good fit for me because, it's for this duration or this kind of budget. I'm, at a minority serving institution, so it would make sense for me to focus on those types of programs. Perhaps I'd have a better chance with those. But I really want to caution you from doing that and encourage you to keep your focus on the research that you want to do. So again, to be comprehensive, because this is a comprehensive course, we're going to cover the programs, but please do keep your focus on the research you want to do, where you could be able to do that research, and especially finding the right people to talk to have technical conversations about that work. So that's my caveat or my warning, but let's move forward. Okay, so what are we not going to talk about? And this is not a comprehensive list either, but here are some other DoD programs that are well known. The Vannevar Bush Faculty Fellowship, a PCASE, that's right there, the Centers of Excellence, SBIR, STTR, and the NDSEG Graduate Fellowship. So pause this if you want to read through these, but we're not talking about these. We just can't cover everything here. Okay, so single investigator, I'm using this term a little bit loosely, but what we're talking about here is an award that would generally be supporting a PI and a grad student for something like 3 years. Now, there's a wide range here in terms of what could be supported. This could be an award that's maybe for 100 or 150K for a year or 18 months. It could be something that's 700 or 800K for 5 years. It could be anything in between. So what I'm referring to here are the awards that are made generally out of like a core program. So these are kind of your regular awards, the most basic type of award, right? Not basic in a bad way, but these are kind of the most common type of awards. Now, generally, they have a rolling deadline for these. Now, this does not mean that there's not a program officer who would actually give you a deadline and say, I'm going to need it by this date. It doesn't mean that there could not be deadlines introduced in the future, hard deadlines. That there's also certainly a cycle that occurs in terms of when the budget comes, when new starts are made. So it doesn't matter that, I don't mean to imply that submitting it any day of the year is equivalent, but there generally is not a hard deadline for those. That's the point that I want to make. But keep in mind, things can change at any point in time. So this actually is a good time for me to remind everybody that this is not official guidance, and I'm putting information out here that generally holds, but you always want to find out for anything that you're interested in the specifics for that year, for that solicitation, and make sure that you have all the correct information. Again, this is to provide the context and what you can generally expect. Now, these awards are certainly not only for one single PI. Single investigator is really meant to indicate the scope, that this is not usually like a team type of award, but many times there could be two PIs working on it, equally. They could be from the same institution or from different institutions. There might be one PI who's the primary PI and then another PI that's funded at 20% or something like that. So there's a lot of flexibility here, which makes these really good because this could be something that's tailored to your needs, your specific needs for the project. Now, again, these are generally from the core program. So these, what I'm calling the core programs, are the programs that exist every year. So year to year, there's a program, it has a name, it has a program description, it has a program manager, and each year that program will usually be there again. Of course, staffing can change. A program could be canceled or cut. The priority areas, what the program manager wants to fund could change. So any of that can happen, but generally the programs remain in existence year to year, and they generally have a budget and usually will make some new starts each year. Some years they may make more new starts than others. But again, that's what we're calling a core program. Okay, so that is perhaps the most important type of award to know about when we're talking about the OXRs. So these would be AFOSR, ARO, and ONR. And that is probably the most important one for you to know about. Now, let us move on to a different type of award. So MURI, this is one that people are familiar with. They get excited about MURIs because MURIs are big money. They're generally on exciting topics. And so let's talk a little bit about them here. Now, this is an announcement for the MURI topics for this year, and they will always very clearly state timelines. This is very important. MURI is something that has a hard deadline, so that's always going to be right at the top of the announcement, that there's a formal white paper process, or there's a restricted time period for asking questions, a formal white paper that's submitted, and then another period for questions, and of course a hard deadline for the proposals. So this is a lot more formal than what I was talking about previously. Now, the very important thing to remember for MURI, initiatives. Okay, excuse the typo there. I think you know what I'm trying to communicate. Initiative. Okay, so the big thing that we want to remember about MURI, which again is a multidisciplinary program, is that this should be where two or more disciplines are coming together and each is contributing something so that the other side benefits as well. So what would not be a good MURI topic, for example? And these topics are vetted, they're competed internally amongst the program managers before they are decided on and then announced. So when we see the MURI topics announced, we know that each OXR feels that these topics that they have published are ones that meet the criteria that I'm going to talk about. But it helps, I think, you to understand what the thought process is behind coming up with these MURI topics. So multidisciplinary can mean a lot of different things. For something to be a really strong MURI topic, you should be taking information and ideas and applications from one discipline and using that with another, and that other discipline should also be benefiting. So maybe we can think about two different examples. So let's think about something from geoscience, since that's where I come from. So if I had an idea for a multidisciplinary topic, and I said, oh, here's this problem in geoscience. It's something that we haven't been able to solve. It's really hard to characterize this situation or this phenomenon. This is something we think we could learn more about if we use this instrumentation, this new analytical technique that's commonly used, or it's come online recently in materials science. So we're going to bring on someone from materials science, and they're going to help us look at our earth materials using their methods, and we're going to learn something really new and potentially exciting. Now, this could be a really great research topic to pursue, but it would really not be a MURI topic because you would just be taking a standard technique or framework from one discipline and then applying it to another. Again, that could be very valuable research. It could be funded as a single investigator. It could also be considered multidisciplinary. But a better MURI topic would be one that would be taking some, say, theoretical framework or analytical methods from another discipline, maybe say from physics, applying that into the geosciences, but then something from geoscience was actually feeding back and informing, say, for example, the further development of a theory from physics. Then you have a real synergy between the disciplines or among the disciplines if there are more than two. And so the idea is that this work really would not be getting done if it were not in a very dedicated multidisciplinary way. Now let's look further at what this announcement looks like here. So the topics are listed, and you can see that looks like the AFOSR topics were first, and they list the ones from ARO and from ONR. And let's see, when you click on one of the topics, which was an AFOSR topic, there will generally be a one-page description, and they'll all follow this same format with a background, objective, research concentration areas. The resources, they're generally going to be the same for each topic. Now they're over $7 million over 5 years. And then the topic chiefs, which will generally be 2 people, and you'll be able to contact them with their phone numbers and email addresses listed right there. So, MURI is an exciting opportunity, and I would encourage you to pursue it if you see a topic that looks to be of interest with you. You would want to have a lot of conversation with the program officers or program managers who are what's known as these topic chiefs, and make the most of that, the question and answer periods that you have. They are going to be able to tell you if it would be to your advantage to plan a collaboration with DoD researchers, perhaps, what kind of letters of support you might want to get. And if you are a very junior faculty member who's thinking of leading up a MURI team, it would not be unheard of that as a pre-tenure or a very early career faculty member that you could not win a MURI topic as a leader of a team. But I would say that you may want to ask have some conversations with the topic chiefs to understand if you are really going to be perceived as ready to be able to lead a team like that, because again, you don't have the experience that someone who's 10, 15, or 20 years into their career does. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because I'm getting back to what we talked about with the consensus versus individual based decision making. And because this is a very large award, even though, as I said, with DoD, you're more able to support the high risk and based on the individual based decision-making processes, MURI decisions are actually more of a consensus-based process. So something like being a very new PI could be seen as more risky. You haven't managed a big team before, especially when that team is distributed across the country, for example. Even saying something like across the country. So that reminds me that anything that you're looking at that might involve an international collaboration, you're going to want to read very carefully for that year's announcement, what restrictions there might be for that. Generally, and this is not, again, official guidance and things can change, but it was generally not possible to fund a researcher outside the U.S. under MURI, but perhaps they could be an unfunded collaborator. So these are all of the not really little details, but they're important details that you will want to ask the topic chiefs. And so MURI should involve a lot of conversations, and if you have already built a relationship with a program officer because perhaps you've already been funded on something like a single investigator award, then you're going to want to use that connection that you have to really ask the questions and get the information that you need. But these are really exciting opportunities. This absolutely can be groundbreaking work that's supported through the MURI program, quite regularly. So it is something to get excited about, but I would encourage you to do your research, have the conversations, and I'm going to talk later about how you can build up to something like winning a MURI. Okay, so we are going to move on to an instrumentation program. So the Defense University Research Instrumentation Program is DURIP. So like it sounds, it's an instrumentation program. It's not supporting you to do research, but it is supporting you to get the equipment or instrumentation that you need to do that work. Generally, what is supported would be like a complete system. So you could get a number, for example, a number of weather stations or something like that that are individual units, but they're going to be put together to create a system that you're going to use to make measurements, for example. So if you have a set of equipment that you want, that's something that's good to run by a program manager so you can learn, does this qualify? Probably something like that would, but this is important for you to ask about those details. Now, this is something that will have a hard deadline, and it does not support the research, but as a general rule, you do want to include information on the research that you would be doing with the instrumentation. So you're not promising to do a specific research study because you're not getting funding for that, but if you have a project funded by DoD already, you would want to mention that and talk about how the instrumentation will help you, do more with that work. A good question that people ask is, do I need to be funded already by DoD to get a DURIP? You do not, but if you are already funded, then again, you're going to be able to probably get through and have a conversation pretty easily with your program manager, program officer, and then learn, hey, might this idea that I have for picking up this instrumentation, might that be a good idea for DURIP? And have that conversation. If you are new to DoD and you want to go for a DURIP, you could be funded, but still you would want to have a conversation. And maybe during the time that you are preparing the proposal for DURIP, you could prepare a white paper and start some conversations about a research project, because while it wouldn't be guaranteed that if you get the DURIP, you're then going to get funding for the research project, it could be the case that having a white paper or to start, working on a proposal that the program officer knows that you're working towards and is expecting, that could help you maybe with winning a DURIP, because the idea is that you are engaged and you are with DoD and you are thinking about next steps, right, of how you could use this instrumentation. Now, one thing that I do want to highlight here is related to the budget. So in the announcement, it says that DURIP can be between $50K and $1.5 million. Now, this is a very, very big range. So you definitely want to talk to the program officer about your proposed budget. So when I was at ARO, it was very unusual for a DURIP to be made higher than $250K. But at ONR, there were regularly DURIPs awarded that were much larger. So you would need to check and see what those numbers are right now. And don't do something like submit a proposal for a DURIP for $600K or $700K to the Army, thinking that would be no problem, unsolicited, when just because you may have been funded by the Navy on a DURIP of that size. So this goes again back to what I've been saying about getting the information for each of the OXRs, learning what's normal for them, what their range is, what their expectation is, and not making assumptions from one base to the next. So, all right. Now, We will talk briefly about special programs for HBCU and MIs, or minority serving institutions. And you will see this represented as MI or MIs or MSI. You'll see both representations used, so it's the same thing. Now, there are a variety of programs that will be available either pretty much annually or special programs, special announcements related to HBCU and MIs. Now, one, for example, is a research and education program, and I have the BAA screenshot from that for this year shown below. And so this will generally be something that you want to work closely with your institution with, because it will be a limited number that can come from your institution, so like a limited submission. And they are going to have a lot of experience with these types of programs because they generally would have been submitting for this for many years. And so this is one that you want to loop your institution in as early as you possibly can to get guidance from them. And you are also going to want to talk to a technical program manager. So that's somebody who meets your, fits your research area, and also the HBCU MI point of contact. And you can find who those people are within the BAA. So here's a list of them here. So this is because you want to understand what they're looking for from both a perspective of the research and what they would look for in terms of the education plan and how that should be built out. And again, your institution can help you a lot with that. So this is one where you want to talk to people, not just about the technical idea, but about the plan more broadly, and take it from there. So now whether this supports research or instrumentation, that can vary from year to year, the rep specifically. And then the special calls and special announcements, those you're just going to have to read each one and learn, well, what are they looking for with this call? Because that can vary and the budget can vary, etc. So a point that I want to make about this, and I'm going to actually make it on the next slide as well, but I'll make it briefly here, is that these, of course, they are great opportunities, but sometimes they can be more competitive to win than something from the core program or something like the single investigator. So when you are talking to the technical program manager about an idea for a special opportunity that's maybe for HBCU MI, you want to be also talking to them about, well, if this doesn't go through, what could be a plan B? Could it be scoped down and perhaps submitted to your core program? Because again, these, while they're great opportunities, oftentimes the money for them does not come from the program manager's core program. So they're going to be enthusiastic about you getting one of these because they want to have that added to their portfolio without having to really pay for it. So it's a bonus for them. So they'll be supportive. But they can be very competitive in terms of the success rate being fairly low. And of course, it depends on the program. The main point is just not to make the mistake of thinking, oh, because only some schools in the US can apply for this, and mine is one of them, that maybe I will have a higher chance. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but I would not just assume that you will. All right, so let us move on and talk about DEPSCoR. So, Defense Established Program to Stimulate Competitive Research, or DEPSCoR. Now, this is another one that you want to work closely with your institution on for the same reasons that I described with the HBCU MI programs. So you can find on the DEPSCoR website that the states and territories that are eligible to apply for this are highlighted, and these are states and territories that receive a relatively low amount of defense research dollars. So one point that I want to make about this is that as of now, at least, this program needs to be reauthorized each year. So what that means is that when we have delays with the budget, which is very common, and we're under a continuing resolution, and the Congress has not decided on and agreed upon a final budget, this DEPSCoR program is affected by that, in that the announcement can't come out until the final budget is decided upon. So you may expect to see a DEPSCoR announcement each year, but then you may not see it. So if you're looking for that and you're not seeing that, that could be the reason. Now, again, keep in mind that anything can change, but that's been the situation in recent years anyway. So now with the DEPSCoR program, you are going to want to check again year to year exactly what type of call that they have put out. In recent years, this has been for a partner type of award where there is a research project that's proposed by, say, like a junior or a new to DoD PI from a DEPSCoR state, and then a senior or an experienced already funded PI from a DEPSCoR state, which with the idea that person could serve as a mentor and kind of a bridge into DoD for the newer PI, and they would do a research project together. But what they're looking for again could change year to year, so just really keep an eye on this. And importantly, just like I said on the last slide with HBCU-MI, don't forget the core programs, because the DEPSCoR program can be very competitive. And so if you lose out just because it's very competitive, I can say from having read many DEPSCoR proposals that the DEPSCoR proposals that come in are usually quite strong. I mean, they really do have a lot of effort put into them because you have that partnership between the two PIs. The institution usually supports these proposals pretty well, so they get them in pretty good shape. So it was kind of disappointing to see so many good proposals come in and not too many could be supported. And I know that the OXRs have done some work to reduce the number of proposals coming in by reducing the number of research topics that the call is in reference to. So again, just ask the right questions to get the information you need, including what a plan B could be if it's not supported, just because it's so competitive, right? So don't forget those core programs. Now, something that the DEPSCoR program has been engaged in for a number of years now are DEPSCoR days. And this is when the folks who are leading DEPSCoR and a sampling of program managers, program officers from each of the OXRs will travel to an institution at a DEPSCoR state. Looks like recently there was one at University of Oklahoma, and this will generally be a one-day workshop where they will present on the DEPSCoR program and have a chance for PIs to meet program officers. So when I was participating in these, again, it's the same message that I'm going to repeat one more time, that it's easy to focus in on that DEPSCoR call, like that research call that I was referring to with the two PIs, but it's very important to use any kind of day like that you might participate in to learn broadly about the opportunities through DoD, because they're much, much more broader and more abundant than just the DEPSCoR call. All right, so let us talk a little bit about conferences, which could be supported. So conferences can be supported either partially or in full. So there you could request funds to support part of an event, or partial support for an event that's going on and that you may be participating in. You could also ask for support to hold an event like a workshop. And this can be something that you may want to consider, because this could be a relatively small amount of money, like tens of thousands of dollars. So for that reason, it can be something that could be more easy for a program manager to fit excuse me, into their budget. So this is something that's good to keep in mind. And a workshop could be a very valuable event where you could propose gathering some subject matter experts together, perhaps from a variety of disciplines, to talk about a targeted interdisciplinary topic. There could be government folks there from DoD, perhaps from other agencies outside of DoD. And this could be a very valuable event that would give you a lot of time to network with other people, of course, in your field and related disciplines, and of course the government people as well. So if you think you have an idea for a workshop, then talk to the program manager about that idea and see if that's something that you could submit for. Now, the rules around conferences can change frequently. So while these are a type of award that I would encourage you to pursue, you want to also be asking questions here about the logistics of it. And this is something like, for example, the amount of lead time that you need. You may need 6 months or more lead time to get something approved, because anything that relates to travel and things like that can be associated with something like entertainment. Now, generally, the DoD is not going to pay for entertainment at the conference event, but because of scandals and things in the news about government employees or government-funded events that perhaps had expenses that were unreasonable, and this is not anything that I ever saw taking place in anything that I was part of. In fact, these were some news stories from other parts of the government outside of DoD, maybe about 10 years ago, that caused more scrutiny of these types of events. So anything that relates to travel, anything where food and beverages may be served, it's going to undergo more review. So this does not mean that these kinds of things can't happen and that you shouldn't pursue them, but it really comes down to lead time. So you just want to make sure there's enough time so that everything can be reviewed and it can be approved and hopefully be supported. So let us talk about the Young Investigator Programs. Now, the best way to get a bit more information on this than I'm going to be able to talk about here is to use a resource that I've created in a Google Doc. So this resource is a table that lists all of the main early career programs for federal funders, including the 4 DoD ones. Those being AFOSR, ARO, ONR, and the YFA from DARPA, right? That's the 4th one. So each one of these has its own set of rules and conditions, and so I have summarized those here. A very important one that everyone wants to know about right away, it is PI eligibility, because this of course has to do with like if permanent resident or U.S. citizen status is required, not for the DARPA YFA, but it is for the others. And also how many years out of your PhD or into your tenure track position you would need to be. So the YFA and the AFOSR YIP and the ONR YIP all have a hard deadline, and I'm not again going to review what those are here, but I will provide a link to this document, which is a living document, so last updated in March of this year, and I will keep it updated. And if you find something on here that is not up to date, please send me an email and we'll get it updated so we can all contribute to keeping this up to date and having this be a handy resource, because there's a lot of information that we need to stay up to date on. So all of those have a hard deadline, and there is a structured process for you to go through. The one thing that I want to really highlight here is that ARO has a different type of process, and this is called the Early Career Program. And these are actually funded out of the core program. So if you are talking to a program manager at ARO about a research topic, perhaps for a single investigator type award, and you are within the criteria, eligibility criteria in terms of how many years out and your immigration status, you can ask the program manager, hey, could this be an early career program proposal? And talk to them about that, because it very well could be. Now, as of right now anyway, there is a maximum budget on that, but it could be worth it for you to stay within that budget and get that ECP, because that's a prestigious award. Now, I don't have numbers on this, but I believe that because it's integrated into the core programs, you're not directly competing with other candidates, it could be easier to get an early career award from ARO than from AFOSR or ONR, just for the reason that, again, it's not a direct competition, but you're going to have to talk to a program manager about your topic and see if that could be a fit. So use this as a resource. And also I want to mention something here, which is that some of these, not all, but of these awards applications require a letter, a chair letter. So this is a very important document that you do not want to overlook. You don't want to neglect this, wait to the last minute, or just kind of put some boilerplate in there and forget it. It's different than NSF in that way. So I do have a video on my YouTube channel on what you must know about the letters you need for your proposals. I would encourage you to check that out. That also talks about letters of support, letters of collaboration. These are things that you may want to consider gathering, if appropriate, for your YIP, your ECP, etc. So check out that video, and that will give you an overview again of the letters, and you can ask program manager, program officer about if it would be advantageous or appropriate for you to get those letters or try to establish collaborations so you can get the letters, but they will give you guidance with that. Okay, so we are going to wrap up here with the early career programs, and I will see you in the next video for our next lesson on how to search for DoD funding.